My parents died in a car accident when I was just 5 years old. Their car skidded off the highway during a stormy night and plunged into a deep ravine. They said my parents died instantly without pain, but I'm not so sure. Every time I close my eyes, I still see the wrecked car and hear the sirens blaring in my head like an endless nightmare. No close relatives were willing to take me in. Everything was processed quickly, and just a few weeks later, I was in an orphanage on the outskirts of the city. Those years dragged on, cold and hollow. I was never short of food or clothes, but what I longed for was a real hug, a warm glance, someone who'd call me daughter and truly mean it. When I was 9, everything changed. One spring afternoon, while I was putting toys away after activity hour, the orphanage manager called me outside. A well-dressed couple was waiting there. The woman wore large sunglasses, her blonde hair neatly tied up, her smile gentle but distant. The man wore a navy blue suit, a gleaming watch, and eyes that studied me seriously, as if evaluating a major investment. They were Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, real estate billionaires. The press called them the Cold Steel Empire, known for running their corporation with strict discipline and absolute secrecy. No one ever thought they would adopt a child, especially not an ordinary little girl like me. I moved in with them the following week. The mansion was like a castle. There were maids, a private chef, the chauffeur, and even a study room with daily tutors. My clothes were custom made, and every holiday I received gifts from brands I had only seen on TV before. But one thing was strictly off limits. No one was. To mention I was adopted. They introduced me as a distant relative, brought in due to special circumstances. At every party, gathering, or event with media or elite guests, I was instructed to stay silent, behave appropriately, and never talk about the orphanage or my past. If anyone asked too much, I was to smile and change the subject. Even surrounded by luxury, I felt like I was acting in a play. Every move, every word, every step had to be calculated. I learned to sit properly, speak with the right tone, and pick the right food at lavish dinners. One misstep, and my adoptive mother would give me a cold stare, while my adoptive father would remain silent the entire evening, treating me like a ghost. I never dared call them mom or dad. They never asked me to, and probably never wanted to hear it anyway. My room was like something out of a fairy tale, but there wasn't a single family photo-only art hung on the walls, photos of them with politicians or major business figures. Not one frame included me. Sometimes I'd catch my adoptive mother watching me from a distance with an odd expression, not quite cold, not quite warm, as if she were remembering something or measuring whether I truly belonged in this life. I used to think if I just behaved well, studied hard, acted perfectly, maybe one day they'd genuinely see me as their daughter. But deep down, I always knew some doors, once closed, never open again. Patrick studied software engineering. I majored in psychology. We met at a mental health seminar hosted at our university. I still remember the moment he walked in, his hair messy from the rain, coat soaked, but his smile lit up the room like the storm outside didn't exist. He sat next to me, and while we waited for the speaker to begin, he turned and asked, "You here for the extra credit too, or do you actually care?" I laughed. It was such a blunt, silly question, but it made me feel at ease. We started talking and never stopped. When the seminar ended, Patrick asked if I wanted to grab dinner that night. For the first time, I told a stranger my story about the orphanage, the wealthy but distant adoptive parents, and the constant sense of not belonging. Patrick didn't flinch. He didn't look at me with pity, but with genuine curiosity. "You survived, and you've made it. That's what matters," he said. From that moment, I knew I'd fall for him. We were together for 3 years. Patrick always made me feel safe, not wealthy, not flashy, but attentive to every small detail. The perfect cup of coffee, a light blanket when I couldn't sleep, or just sitting silently beside me when I needed it. He made me feel, for the first time, like I truly belonged to someone, not as a burden, but just as myself. But then, as our relationship grew more serious, things began to change. The first time I asked about his family, Patrick brushed it off. He simply said they were pretty traditional and lived very differently from us. I didn't think much of it then because I believed if we loved each other enough, his family would come around. But slowly, I realized Patrick always avoided taking me home, always sidestepped gatherings where his parents would be present. During the holidays, while I sat alone in our empty apartment, Patrick went home to his family, never mentioning me. Once, I started to feel uneasy. I asked him directly why he hadn't told his family about me. Patrick stayed quiet for a long moment, then finally admitted, "Madison, you know how they are. They care a lot about background. They'll want to know who your family is, where you come from. My mom, she won't accept you, not because of you, but because you're not who they expect." I was stunned, not because I hadn't suspected it, but because Patrick, the man who said he loved me for who I was, didn't have the courage to stand up for me. "So what am I to you? Something you hide?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. He took my hand. "It's not like that. I'm scared. You don't know what my mom's like. I pulled my hand away. "I know what it feels like to be rejected. I've lived with that my whole life. I can't go through it again, especially not from the person I love hiding me." After that conversation, things went on, but something had already broken. Patrick apologized again and again, promising he'd introduce me to his family soon. He said he was just waiting for the right time, but that time never came. Then one day, he proposed. It was simple, in the park where we'd had our first kiss. I cried, not from joy, but because my heart was torn in two. One half wanted to believe in his promise, and the other couldn't forget the feeling of not being accepted. I said yes, but deep down, I knew the real battle hadn't even begun, and Patrick's family, especially his mother, wasn't going to let someone like me in easily. The restaurant was on the top floor of a luxury building, golden lights reflecting off glass tables, soft piano music floating through the space designed for the elite. Patrick gave my hand a gentle squeeze as we stepped in. I didn't say anything, just nodded slightly, hiding my anxiety behind a polite smile. His parents were already there, seated near the window with a view of the city skyline. His mother, Evelyn, wore a pearl-collared silk dress, diamond bracelet glinting under the lights. His father, Gregory, looked stern, his sharp gaze and tight, lips giving off an air of constant judgment. Patrick greeted them first and pulled out my chair. I smiled politely, offering a soft-spoken greeting, but they barely nodded, their eyes sweeping over me like I was an unremarkable stranger. Less than 5 minutes after the server poured the wine, Evelyn spoke. "So, Madison, what do you do?" "I'm interning at a counseling center," I replied calmly. "We specialize in supporting teens dealing with depression and trauma." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, a career in listening and giving advice? Sounds interesting." I knew exactly what she meant by interesting. It wasn't a compliment. Gregory turned to Patrick. "And where did Madison grow up?" Patrick hesitated. I saw the conflict in his eyes. She grew up in an orphanage, then she was adopted. Her adoptive family was well off. A long silence followed. Evelyn set down her wine glass and looked directly at me. "So, no clear background?" I froze for a second. I thought I misheard, but she continued without a hint of hesitation. "You see, our family has tradition, reputation, and well, Patrick is quite sentimental. Marriage is not something to treat like buying a pair of shoes on sale." Patrick tightened his grip on my hand under the table. Mom, don't say it like that. Madison's not sweetheart. She cut him off. I'm just stating facts. It's not offensive if it's true. Have you thought ahead? The future children? They'll carry a name with no known origin. My face burned, my throat tightened. I wanted to get up and walk away, but Patrick spoke before I could. I have thought ahead, Mom. I've thought about the person I want to spend my life with, and that person is Madison, whether you approve or not. Gregory's brow furrowed. Patrick, show some respect. This is a family dinner, not a battleground. Patrick stood up and pulled out my chair. If this is a family, then the person I love deserves at least a basic level of respect. He turned to me, his voice softening. Let's go. I looked into his eyes, steady, fearless, and knew I wasn't alone. We walked out of the restaurant under the judgmental eyes of other diners, followed by a heavy silence. No one called after us, no one tried to stop us, but I didn't need them to. All I needed was Patrick, and I knew that the moment we stepped out of that restaurant, I wasn't just leaving a dinner. I was walking away from old expectations, deep-seated prejudice, and people who would never accept me for who I truly was. We registered our marriage on a crisp fall morning, no party, no lavish gown, just a small government office, 2 signatures, and a quiet promise between me and Patrick. We'll build our family on love, not approval. When Patrick told his parents about the wedding, their reaction was colder than winter air. His mother raised an eyebrow, looked him dead in the eye, and asked, "Do you really think marrying that girl won't bring shame to the entire family?" His father didn't say much. He just pulled out his wallet, placed a blank check on the table, and said, "If you let us handle the wedding entirely, this is yours. If not," Patrick tore up the check right in front of them. A few weeks later, we received an invitation to his parents' 35th wedding anniversary celebration. Patrick wanted to go. He said he couldn't keep avoiding them forever, that maybe if they saw we were still together, still happy, they'd eventually come around. I didn't believe it, but I agreed for him. I wore a simple yet elegant dress, hair in a soft bun, light makeup. Patrick held my hand as we entered their mansion, where the party buzzed with hundreds of guests in glamorous attire, laughter echoing through the garden. We felt like shadows stepping into a world that wasn't meant for us. No one greeted us. No one looked me in the eye. Handshakes for Patrick were polite. Glances toward me were cold as ice. A middle-aged woman, probably one of Patrick's aunts, looked me up and down, then turned to her husband and whispered, loud enough to hear, "I wonder which maid wandered in here." Patrick heard it. So did I. He gripped my hand tighter and led me around, looking for a place to sit, but every table was somehow coincidentally full, no room for us. Then his mother appeared behind us, still wearing a polite smile as she said, "Oh, Patrick, you two really should have arrived earlier. Shame. All the tables are full now, but there are some folding chairs in the kitchen if you don't mind." I said nothing, but my chest tightened. Patrick squeezed my hand so hard I could feel him trembling. "We don't need folding chairs," he said, his voice low. "And we don't need to stay here either." Then he turned to me. "Let's go, Madison." We turned and left. The whole garden seemed to pause for a beat. Then the fake laughter and idle chatter resumed, like we'd never been there. On the way home, I stared out the window. Night had fallen, and the glow of passing cars cast scattered light across my face. Patrick still held my hand, this time truly trembling, not from fear, but from rage. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "They don't deserve you, Madison. But I can't choose the family I was born into. I can only choose the person I want to spend my life with." I didn't reply, but deep down, I knew I had chosen the right person. As for his family, they had removed themselves from our story. And one way or another, there would be a price for that. Patrick slammed the door behind him as we entered the apartment. I was still sitting on the couch, still in the same cream-colored dress I'd worn to the party, not too flashy, but not plain either. It had once made me feel beautiful enough to stand beside him, but tonight, every glance passed right through me as if I were invisible. Tonight was awful, Patrick snapped. I looked up, hoping he'd follow with something softer, but he just shrugged off his coat, tossed it onto a chair, and walked straight into the kitchen. I stood up and followed. You mean because of the way they treated me? He turned back, staring at me like I just said the most ridiculous thing in the world. Madison, you made it worse. All they needed was a little courtesy from you. You were silent the whole night, stone-faced, not even polite greetings. Couldn't you just behave normally for one evening? I froze. They treated me like I didn't exist. I tried to smile, I tried to make conversation, but you saw they didn't even bother to respond. Your mom turned away when I wished her good health. Patrick shook his head, scoffing. That's no excuse for making me look bad in front of them. I swallowed hard. You're embarrassed because of me. He was silent for a moment, then slowly nodded. They're my family, Madison. You made things more uncomfortable for me. I just wanted one peaceful dinner. And I just wanted to be respected. I can't apologize to people who keep insulting me. They've never said one kind word about me. Then maybe you should learn to endure it. They raised me. They're the people I love. You need to show them you're worthy, not act like the whole world's against you. I let out a dry laugh. So if one day our daughter is treated like this, would you tell her to endure it too? That question hung in the air. Patrick didn't answer. He turned away, grabbed a water bottle, and went upstairs. The bedroom door closed without so much as a goodnight. The days that followed passed in heavy silence. Patrick withdrew into his own world, spending most of his time in the home office, eating alone, or going out without telling me where. I tried to keep the peace-cooked meals, clean the house, even left little handwritten notes with sweet messages hoping to soften him, but he never responded. Not a single message, not a glance. Sometimes I walked past the office and saw him with his headphones on, eyes glued to the screen, like I didn't even exist in the same house. One night, I heard laughter downstairs. He was on the phone with his mom, his voice cheerful, telling her about a new project. I stood in the dark at the top of the stairs, listening to that voice, the one that once made me feel loved, now chilled my heart. I have loved Patrick with everything I had. I believed love was strong enough to withstand judgment, prejudice, and scrutiny, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe he did love me, but he loved his family's comfort more. He loved the idea of peace over standing up for me. I sat alone in the living room, the soft light casting a glow on our wedding photo on the wall. I was smiling in that photo, so was he, but looking at it now, that smile felt like a stranger's. I didn't know how much longer I could keep going. But one thing I knew for sure, I would not apologize for being myself, even if it meant facing loneliness. That night's dinner was held at Patrick's family's mansion, so big it felt like a luxury hotel. The scent of expensive food lingered in the air. Crystal chandeliers sparkled as if trying to distract from the tension blanketing the room. Patrick and I walked in, his hand resting lightly on my back, but offering no warmth. His mother, Paula, sat at the head of the long table, her eyes sweeping over me like she'd spotted a stain on her silk dress. Not a greeting, not a smile, just a frigid silence. I tried to smile, nodding to each of the family members, but their eyes brushed over me like I wasn't even there. One of Patrick's aunts leaned in and whispered something to her husband, and they both chuckled. I didn't need to guess the topic. I'd grown used to this feeling, but tonight it was heavier, sharper, meaner. Dinner began. Everyone chatted and laughed. I sat quietly, taking tiny bites, as if staying silent would make me disappear. Midway through the meal, when someone asked Patrick about his future plans, Paula abruptly set her knife and fork down with a sharp clink. "Future," she said, eyes locked on me. I don't know what future he expects when my son shackles himself. To an orphan with no background, the table went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. Patrick froze, lips tightly pressed together, but he said nothing, not a word. "I just don't get it," Paula continued, her tone calm but cutting. "There are so many decent girls out there, pretty, educated, from good families, and he chooses some poor, plain girl no one's ever heard of. It's shameful." I stood up, lips trembling. "You don't have to like me, I understand, but please don't speak about me like that in front of everyone." She laughed with scorn. "Oh, so you've got pride? An orphan daring to speak to me? If you had any self-respect, you'd have known from the start you don't belong here." Still, Patrick said nothing. I turned to him, hoping to see courage in his eyes, but all I saw was cowardice. "Patrick," I whispered. He avoided my gaze, then pulled out his wallet, placed a wad of cash in my hand, and whispered, "Just go home. Don't make a scene here." Every cell in my body froze. Not because of his mother's insults, I'd endured plenty of those in my life, but because the man I loved, the man I trusted, chose to stay silent, to side with them, as if I really deserved to be treated this way. I placed the cash back on the table, speaking slowly, clearly. "I don't need money. I need my husband to see that I am a person with dignity." No one said a word. I turned around and walked out of that mansion, lavish but colder than any winter night. I didn't cry on the way home. The tears had dried long ago, leaving only emptiness and the dull ache of a wound that never healed. When I opened the door to our apartment, everything was the same. The old sofa, the wedding photo on the wall, and the traces of a marriage I once believed would last forever. I video called my adoptive parents that night. They were in Switzerland, attending the annual investment summit. But the moment Evelyn saw my pale face on the screen, she shot up from her chair. "What happened, Madison?" she asked, her voice shaking with anger. I told them everything, every detail. The dinner, Patrick's family's eyes, Paula humiliating me in front of everyone. And the moment Patrick handed me money like I was some stranger needing a ride home. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just told it all, calm, cold. When I finished, there was a chilling silence on the other end of the line. My father, Gregory Hawthorne, turned to my mother. "We're flying home immediately." 3 days later, they arrived in New York. I met them at a small cafe by the Hudson River. Evelyn hugged me for a long time. My father simply placed a hand on my shoulder, but his eyes said more than words ever could. "I won't let this go." "Do they know you're the adopted daughter of the Hawthorns?" my mom asked. I shook my head. I never told them. I wanted them to accept me for who I am, not for the name or wealth behind me. My father narrowed his eyes. "They chose not to accept you. Now it's time they find out who they just rejected." That evening was Patrick's grandfather's 70th birthday party, held at one of the most luxurious restaurants in Manhattan. I was invited, a last-minute gesture of courtesy from Patrick's side. At first, I planned to decline, but my parents didn't agree. "They invited you?" "Good, we'll go," my mother said. Patrick had no idea who I was bringing. As we walked in, the chatter began to quiet. I walked between my adoptive parents, both dressed elegantly but modestly. My father's expression was like ice, and my mother wore a gentle, proud smile. The moment Paula saw me, she froze, her eyes shifting from surprise to irritation in seconds. "Oh, Madison, you came too?" she said, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Yes, and these are my parents, Evelyn and Gregory Hawthorne." That line landed like a firecracker in the quiet room. Someone dropped a wine glass, Paula went stiff. Marley, Patrick's sister, looked wide-eyed. Patrick stammered, his lips pale. Hawthorne? You mean which Hawthorne? My father stepped forward and placed a folder on the table in front of Patrick. Gregory Hawthorne, Avalon Real Estate Group, and I just met with our lawyer this morning. Patrick stared at the papers, his hands trembling. This is divorce papers, my father said firmly. Madison has nothing left to hold on to in this marriage, and I won't allow my daughter to be treated like garbage by people who judge others solely by lineage and money. Paula's jaw dropped, but no words came out. A mother might not like her daughter-in-law, Evelyn said calmly, but no one has the right to call my daughter a poor orphan. Because if she were truly poor, tonight you just rejected the one gift you could never afford, her loyalty and her kindness. No one said a word. Patrick sank into his chair, eyes glazed over, and I stood there beneath the dazzling restaurant lights, feeling neither ashamed nor hurt, just free, purely free, like I have finally removed the invisible chains I'd worn. For far too long, news of the unforgettable birthday party spread faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, photos and clips of my father handing Patrick the divorce papers began circulating across financial forums, where the Hawthorne name always drew attention. No one had imagined that the girl with no background was the adoptive daughter of one of the most powerful real estate families on the East Coast. By the following week, shares of Gregory Miller's company, Patrick's father, began to plummet. Major partners canceled meetings. Strategic investors suddenly pulled funding, citing a revaluation of transparency and ethical practices in company operations. In truth, no one needed a detailed explanation. The business world does not favor those who disrespect the wrong people. Patrick's family spiraled into chaos, outwardly polite, inwardly broken. The smiling photos they posted on social media couldn't hide the unraveling truth. Lost contracts, 2 commercial properties. Sold in a rush, and Gregory Miller under investigation for tax fraud related to a recent deal. And me, I said nothing. I didn't need to do anything more. The first messages I received from Patrick's family were bitter. You planned this from the start, didn't you? You destroyed a family just for revenge? Don't think money gives. You class. I didn't respond. A few days later, the tone shifted. Madison, if you could talk to your father, please ask him to stop. They didn't know who you were. Please have mercy on our family. Patrick cried all night. He hasn't eaten. Still, I didn't reply. I once wished they'd understand me, accept me, love me. But when I was silent, they insulted me. When I stood up, they begged. There is no genuine affection, only fear when their privilege was threatened. Patrick signed the divorce papers on a Monday afternoon, no meeting, no note. I received the confirmation from my father's law office. Clean. Quick, just like the moment he pulled out his wallet and handed me cash, asking me to leave early. There's no ending more painful than silence. 3 days after everything was finalized, my parents took me to the airport, a 6-week journey through 4 countries, not to flaunt anything, but to give me space to reflect. We started in Sweden, where snow fell gently on the cobbled streets. Each morning, my mother brewed tea for me, and my father listened as I spoke about the little things in my marriage that had once hurt me. I didn't cry. The pain left me with the first glass of red wine in Stockholm. We went on to Greece, visited white temples nestled on cliffs above the sea. One night, I walked alone on the beach, letting the ocean winds erase the echoes of cruel laughter from that long-ago dinner. At the end of the trip, in a quiet town in southern France, my mother held my hand and said, Madison, you don't have to prove anything. You deserve love, kindness, and everything they tried to convince you. You didn't have the right to ask for. I hugged her tightly. The wind blew through my hair, carrying away all the old weight inside me. I don't hate Patrick, but I don't miss him either. And I know, even if no one chose me at the start, I still get to choose my ending and ending. Not marked by tears, but by absolute peace. An ending that doesn't need forgiveness, only freedom. Madison's story is a powerful reminder that silence isn't always weakness, and leaving a toxic relationship isn't failure. It's a courageous decision to protect your self-worth. In a world where people are often judged by status and origin, Madison proved that dignity, resilience, and integrity cannot be bought. When you stand up for yourself, you don't just reclaim your voice, you reclaim your entire life.